Hello and welcome to another AutoCAD 2007 CAD clip talking about AutoCAD 3D and just kind of continuing along with our surfaces. Lastly, we talked about a planar surface. Well, we've also got a thickened surface, and all I've done here is I've changed the color of these objects just in the properties, these solid objects, which is the resultant. Now this one is an extruded surface and this one is a thickened surface, and I'm just going to erase these guys. Okay, there's also a setting called OBJDEL, or sorry, DEL OBJ, and that is a set var that you can set so that when you create these thickened surfaces and extruded, you retain the original geometry, and that's been set to 0, which is why I was able to erase the solids and then be left with those surfaces. So I'm just going to switch back to be a 2D wireframe and go back to my top view. All I've got here is two surfaces that I've created, planar surfaces, using my planar surface tool over here, and they have different mesh densities, but that is okay. So now what I'm going to talk about is the thickened surface here. So I'm going to go to a 3D view, and again, nothing really fancy about our thickened surface. All it does is take a surface that's planar and makes it thicker, and you give it a number. I find that the extrusion gives us a better resultant, and you can also taper it. So yet to discover all the nuances between the different geometry that's created. Visually it looks the same, but I'm sure somewhere down the line I'll discover the differences. So I'm going to start by using my thickened surface, and I'm going to read my command line. It simply says select surfaces to thicken. So I'm going to pick on a surface and hit enter. It's going to ask me for a thickness. I'm going to type in a number like 10, a relative coordinate, and hit enter, and I'm done. Okay, I can go back and look at that in my different views here in my visual styles. Okay, and then what I always do is I list this object. Okay, it's a 3D solid and history, bounding box, etc. So that was a 3D surface, or sorry, a planar surface that was given thickness. Okay, by using I'm going to use my shift middle mouse button here. Okay, so now I can take that 3D solid and maybe move it over there to the side. Okay, now I'm going to compare that to the extrude. I can extrude a surface. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to set T for taper. I'm going to set a tapering angle of 12 degrees, and then I'm going to give it says specify height. I'll say 15, enter, and it'll taper it. Okay, or I could have not tapered it. Okay, let's move that over to the side. Okay, let's try it again. Extrude. This is as much of an extrusion lesson as a thickened surface. Pick on here, enter, and I'm going to say taper angle T enter of 0, and then a height as I move up of 10. Okay, so this is an extruded one, and this was a thickened surface one. Visually they look the same. If I list this, enter, okay, and I list this, enter. Okay, there's the two of them. They're both 3D solids. Okay, one is an extrusion solid type. This one doesn't tell you what solid type it is. Okay, a little bit different. So what I always do to try to compare them is I will list them and see if there's a difference there. So really the only difference is this is an extrusion, and the one that I use, the thickened surface, is not an extrusion, and somewhere in there I'm sure there's some boundaries that will make them work differently. But my point here being is I can use the thickened surface, pick on here, give a surface thickness of 8 or whatever I want, and it's done. Or I can extrude it. Visually they look the same, okay, but this is a surface that's been thickened. And also notice I use a shift middle mouse button. When you do an extrusion, you still have a nice grip where you can extrude these up and down. Okay, these ones have these beautiful grips. If you do thickened surface, then you cannot change it. Perhaps you can go in and change the thickness in the properties. Let's see. Click on here, go to my properties, material, shadow casting, etc. So I am not sold on this thickened surface. I'm not sure where I would use this, where it would have an advantage over simply using the extrude. However, maybe someone can drop me a line and explain to me where those differences are. So that's about all I want to talk about, closing off our surfaces with the thickened surface, comparing it really to the extrusion, and discovering I'm not a huge fan of necessarily using the thickened surface tool, but there it is.